Also want to take this opportunity to thank your staff for their professionalism and partnership, both preparing for the hearing, but throughout this Congress. The IRS has been consistently receptive to the work of our committee, and my team and I are grateful to you and your team for your cooperation. At the outset, I'd like to highlight your diligent efforts over the past 2 years to implement several new COVID relief programs, especially those we passed under the American Rescue Plan. And because of the American Rescue Plan, nearly 3 million Maryland families received direct relief payments of $1,400 a person. Over 1 million Maryland children benefited from new tax cuts for families through the expansion of the child tax credit. And over 250,000 Maryland workers got a tax break through the expansion of the Earned Income Tax Credit. The IRS played a key role in delivering these funds to Americans across the country. You did that while also working tirelessly to protect your own employees from COVID-19. The obstacles were enormous, but you and your agency delivered, and I want to salute you and the good men and women of the IRS who helped get that vital relief out the door. We also know that the agency, the IRS, continues to be underfunded and understaffed. And the massive tax return processing backlog at the IRS is the result, and we will talk some about that today. Many of my constituents are frustrated that they're still waiting for their 2021 and 2020 refunds. Just last month, I heard from a mother of 2 in Maryland who has to move homes and is counting on her 2021 refund to cover the costs of a security deposit and the first month's rent. Her tax forms are stuck in the backlog along with millions of others. Mr. Commissioner, I know you have made it a priority to address that backlog by hiring new staff at your processing centers and by detailing experienced staff from other parts of the IRS to help with the backlog. I commend you for these efforts, and I want to make sure that this subcommittee is working with you to address this issue as fast as possible. As the chairman of the committee, I've made IRS funding a top priority, and I want to thank Ranking Member Hyde-Smith for working together on these issues so that we can help the IRS replace outdated technology and hire more staff. Less than 2 months ago, this subcommittee provided the IRS with its biggest funding increase in 20 years to do just that, to help serve our constituents, your clients. I look forward to seeing that investment improve service for working families, cut down on hold times, and reduce the backlog. As we work to improve customer service, we also need to improve IRS enforcement. Right now, as you yourself have pointed out, Mr. Commissioner, there's anywhere from $500 billion to $1 trillion in taxes each year that are owed but not paid, what's commonly referred to as the tax gap. These are billions of dollars that are legally due and owing under current tax law. While everyday Americans have their taxes withheld and pay what they owe, we cannot allow the super wealthy to evade the system. By enhancing the capacity of the IRS to track down wealthy individuals' unpaid taxes and big businesses who sidestep their tax responsibilities, we can raise more revenue without changing the tax law. Those who refuse to meet their obligations or avoid their obligations make everybody pay instead. I'm proud of the work we've done to increase the IRS budget to meet these goals. But despite our efforts to prioritize IRS resources in the subcommittee as a result of the overall caps, the funding we secured this year was less than you requested, and I believe less than you need. And we look forward to working with you this year so you can meet your mission. I've heard from some of my colleagues who say that the IRS problems we're seeing are not a budget issue at all. They just say that the IRS needs to hire more customer service agents and upgrade their IT systems, and everything will be fine. Well, that would improve things, but that does cost money. And while money is not the only solution, it is a big part of the answer. Commissioner Rettig, I know that you understand the IRS's problems and want to solve them. I hope that this hearing is an opportunity for us to discuss how we can help the IRS. access the tools it needs to deliver top-notch taxpayer services and beef up enforcement of the super wealthy who are not paying their fair share. But before we move to your testimony, I would like to return to Senator Hyde-Smith and again thank her for her partnership on this subcommittee and for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that very kind welcome. And I certainly appreciate the opportunity to serve as the ranking member on this very important subcommittee, and I look forward to continuing to work with you in crafting responsible funding legislation for fiscal year 2023. And I want to welcome the IRS Commissioner to our hearing today, and thank you for your service. And we look forward to your testimony this morning. The IRS entered this year's tax filing season with a historically high backlog of unprocessed paper returns and correspondence. When such issues arise, the IRS usually speaks about the need for more funding. However, the IRS received more than $3 billion in supplemental funding since 2020. Today, more than $1 billion of this amount remains available and unobligated. Moreover, in this current fiscal year, the IRS received $12.6 billion, its largest funding increase in 2 decades. Despite this robust funding, critical IT modernization projects lag. The tax gap remains wide, the backlogs remain high, and the customer service is at an all-time low. The IRS requests a total of $14.1 billion for the upcoming fiscal year. And I believe it's time for these funding increases to be met with fiscally responsible decision-making that prioritizes that everyday taxpayer and efficiency. I want to ensure that money appropriated to the IRS is no longer diverted away from measures and programs devoted to improving taxpayer services and enforcement. It's my hope that during today's hearing, our priorities align to ensure utmost efficiency and fiscal responsibility with the IRS going forward. Mr. Commissioner, I know you have made some tough choices in responding to additional responsibilities placed on the agency. I thank you for your service, and I look forward to your testimony today.
Thank you, Senator. Our first witness and only witness today is IRS Commissioner Charles P. Rettig. Prior to his confirmation in September 2018, Commissioner Rettig worked in private practice for 36 years, representing thousands of individuals and businesses before the IRS, the Department of Justice Tax Division, federal and state courts, and state taxing authorities. He received a BA in economics from the University of California at Los Angeles, as well as a JD from Pepperdine University and an LLM in taxation from New York University. Commissioner, thank you for coming back. I know that you've testified in front of a number of committees already this season, but we look forward to your testimony and hope you can help us as we work with you to make sure you have the tools you need to do your job and serve the American people. Commissioner Rettig.
Yes, we've had a lot of hearings this year, but I should say that my wife appreciates it because she likes to watch the hearings, so she knows exactly where I am, what I'm saying, and it gives us a 3 or 4 hour discussion each evening as she critiques what I said, what I didn't say, et cetera, et cetera. So it is an honor and a privilege to be in this role. It's an honor and a privilege to be in front of each of you. And Chairman Van Hollen, Ranking Member Hyde-Smith, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Internal Revenue Service operations, the current filing season, and the fiscal 23 budget. As you know, fiscal 21 gross receipts of the Internal Revenue Service were approximately $4.1 trillion, which translates to approximately 96% of the gross revenue of the United States of America. I like to start with that by indicating the importance of the IRS, not only to members of Congress, not only to taxpayers in this country, but really to the rule of law, to the country that we have and the support of the country. We don't make decisions as to the expenditure of the funds collected, but the importance of the IRS in supporting this country from a financial perspective at 96% of the total gross revenue of the country simply cannot be ignored. We need a fully functioning, successful Internal Revenue Service to have a fully functioning, successful United States of America. And, I'm a proud American. You're all proud Americans. That's why we're here. We're willing to give of ourselves to make this country and continue as the greatest country on the planet. I believe that. That's why I came. And I believe in the people of the Internal Revenue Service. The people of the Internal Revenue Service have given extraordinary efforts during the pandemic. We look forward to oversight, and from my confirmation hearing through today, I have welcomed all types of oversight. We do have oversight in certain lanes. Obviously, we have a Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration. We have the GAO. We have the media. We have taxpayers. We have professional associations. We have members of Congress. So oversight should not be a concern. We welcome that. I welcome that. And I believe that every commissioner after me should welcome that. My term, as you're aware, it's a statutory term, and it concludes, not by my choice, but it concludes November 12th of this year. It has been a privilege to be here, a privilege to interact, and I want to bring that in because presumably this might be my last appearance before you. The employees of the Internal Revenue Service are the strength of the agency, and they will continue to be the strength of the agency. And collectively, we need to support them in the efforts going forward. I believe that the President's budget proposal for fiscal 23 supports the employees of the Internal Revenue Service, supports the mission. Again, we request oversight because I think that that's a privilege for tax administration to have people understand what it is and specifically what it is not, for transparency, for people to see what we do and what we don't do. I've read a lot of articles since I've been in this position that I can't wait to contest once I'm no longer in this position. We are here collectively, and I'm speaking to both of you, but as well as to everybody else, to get this right so that we can proudly walk out the door and say we are here supporting the United States of America. And I say that as a proud member of a military family. As you know, my son is a major in the United States Army. Couldn't be more proud of his service, of what he does literally on a daily basis, and I think that most people should feel like that. More than willing to have discussions with respect to the ARP spend plan. We provided a detailed summary of what we're doing with respect to the spend plan on February 12th. We got an omnibus budget on March 15th, so we are adjusting our spend plan. We will come back to you with an adjustment to that so you can see how we are spending the balance of the ARP funds, but we have obligated about $966 million of those funds to date. But know that we've been in more than 100 continuing resolutions since 2001. It is impossible to build out a robust, meaningful technology infrastructure without multi-year, timely, consistent funding. And when we get our funding halfway through each fiscal year, it is impossible for us to plan multi-year expenditures. So with that, and not to go further over my time, I'll turn it back to you, and I'm certainly available for questions. I am also available for meetings individually with members of this committee or with staff for this committee, with or without members of the committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I think we'll do 6-minute rounds, and we may have more than one round. I don't know if other members of the committee will be joining us at this point or not. And I want to start my first round of questions focused on the backlog and customer service issues. So, Mr. Commissioner, you and I were talking a little bit. Can I confirm that it's your goal to eliminate the backlog by the end of this calendar year?
It is my commitment to you individually and as Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service for the IRS to eliminate the backlog. And what we term, that you'll hear us use and you see us use in print, is get healthy, which means through the eyes of the taxpayer doing what they expect us to do by the end of this year.
Got it. And one of the tools we gave you in the last session was direct hire authority. I know you're using that, right?
Absolutely. Congress rescued us. There's no other way for me to say that with direct hiring authority. It was part of the omnibus budget, March 15. March 16, we started with job fairs at our 3 big processing centers. For the last 2 weeks of March, we went out on the ground, held job fairs. They have been extraordinarily successful. We are looking to hire 5,000 people this year, 5,000 people this year. It's a total of 10,000. To give you an example, we went to, the 3 processing centers, Ogden, Utah, Kansas City, Missouri, and Austin, Texas. We went into Austin, Texas. We had 500 people show up with resumes, meaning their package is complete. We made 500 offers on the spot. We have about a 93% offer rate to people who show up at our job fairs on the spot. We're also doing virtual job fairs. And in the next 30 days, we're doing another round of job fairs at these same locations. They've been very successful. They've received a lot of local press in a good way. You know, the government's coming in and giving jobs, federal jobs to the community, that type of thing. And without the direct hiring authority that we got in the budget, I would not be able to report anything really positive. We cannot hire people at $15 to $17 an hour in these communities when we're competing with Amazon, we're competing with Target, that's $20 an hour. Walmart recently announced they're hiring 50,000 people. Walmart recently announced truck driver positions at $110,000 a year, and we come in $15 an hour, federal jobs. So we need to be able to hire on the spot.
Good. Well, thank you for making use of that authority. And now, just in terms of the sort of and I know you made some progress already, but the mountain that we need to tackle in order to achieve your goal, just so we're on the same page, and just quick yes or no answers, if you can, to confirm the numbers I've got. I'm looking at a status of unopened mail and backlog inventory issued April 26, so it should be pretty current. Paper returns waiting to be processed, calendar year 2021, over 2.5 million. Those received in calendar year 2022, just over 8.9 million, for a total of 11.5 plus million. Is that
the paper returns for 21 as of April 21? The paper returns for 21 are 1.8 million. For 20 received in 22 are 4 million, which somebody might discuss whether those are backlogged or not. We just concluded, the April 18th filing date. Okay. But the total paper returns that we're sitting on as of April 21 is 5.8 million.
All right, let me stop you there. So whatever information I've got here is obviously incorrect. I thought it came from the IRS.
I'm reading the individual returns.
Yeah.
And if you went to the right, you might be reading the total return.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. I'm reading the total individual and business. You're right. So this is, I guess, the document that I've got, status of unopened mail and backlog inventory issued April 26, 2022, is the most up-to-date information. Yeah, got it. Thank you. So, one of the frustrations, and I know you understand this, that a lot of taxpayers have, is if they get a notice of deficiency, they want to get somebody on the line to explain it. Let me modify that. They want to get in contact with somebody quickly. And as you well know, given the volume of phone calls that come in versus the operators and folks you've got answering them, it's really hard to get through by phone. So online communication seems to be the answer. That is the way most people do a lot of business in the United States. I mean, you can communicate with your bank. You can communicate with other entities that way. When will a taxpayer be able to communicate in real time with someone at the IRS online?
There's different levels of communication that we have online, but taxpayers can create a taxpayer online account that they can go in and monitor their account, and they can change information. They can, on their own, without interacting with anybody at the IRS, enter into an installment payment arrangement if they owe less than $50,000. But we're also mindful that we live in a country where there's tens of millions of people who do not have broadband access, who do not have online, don't have a smartphone. So it's critical that our resources also be deployed in our taxpayer assistance centers, which are really our frontline retail operations where somebody can walk in, we prefer by appointment, but even unannounced, as well as, telephone access. What's the driver of the inventories is, for the most part, people who answer the phones also are responsible for conducting resolution of paper that we're left with. So we have made various decisions. We leave people on the phones, and then in theory, when the phone volume would come down, they would move to the paper. Well, we have not had either of those volumes come down in 2 years. We currently have moved people into the paper processing, trying to answer the phones the best we can, trying to get people to interact with us.
Right. So thank you for giving me your commitment and goal in terms of an end-of-year deadline for the backlog. Can you give us a sense of when I, as a customer, as one of my constituents who has a question for the IRS about their tax return, when they're going to be able to communicate online with the IRS?
For what that depends upon what they're looking for, but we get tens of millions of online contacts currently, and those operate seamlessly and successfully. Where we really want to be, we're about 5 years from, I think, being what the agency should be in terms of the ability of the folks who want to just interact with us online to do everything with us online, with the exception of filing a return. There's another, we don't have pre-populated returns, but otherwise to provide and interact with us online. I would say that we're about 5 years away from that. It could be a little more. It depends upon the funding that we get. It depends upon technologies that develop.
Thank you. Ranking Member Hyde-Smith.
Thank you very much. Mr. Commissioner, we've heard a lot about the historically high backlog, and we've discussed your recent pledge that the backlog would absolutely be resolved by the end of 2022, in large part due to the IRS's ambitious plan to onboard thousands of new employees. How is the challenging labor market affecting that hiring plan for you?
Well, thanks to Congress, we got direct hiring authority. So we're in a different world now than we were before March 15 when we received that authority. And what we're talking about is onboarding folks at our submission processing and our accounts management facilities around the country. Submission processing is dealing with paper, whether that's mail or paper returns. Accounts management is resolving a taxpayer issue that they may have with respect to an already filed return. We have over 2,500 people coming on board, but we've also done a lot of other things that we've not previously done to bring these volumes down. And I simply, the way I summarize it is that we're trending in a good direction. I'm comfortable sitting here today telling you that we are committed to, and I am committed to being healthy by the end of this year. That obviously, not to play lawyer games, but, another COVID, another this, another that. Unforeseen circumstances could interrupt that, but where we are today, I'm committed to doing that. If we see unforeseen circumstances, some type of a surge, whether it's COVID or some other non-COVID related issue that impacts us, I would come back up and let you know that I need to adjust. This is, my reputation with you, our reputation with you, and we want you to see what we're doing. But we've also engaged contractors to do what contractors could do, about 2,500 people coming in. I think it's well aware, it's been played up a lot, that we did surge teams. We brought back employees who've been in these 2 lanes within the last 2 years. We brought them back in to do that processing, and now we're going for the employees who left within 3 or 4 years to bring more back in. And all of the efforts that we've made show that we are trending in a good direction. And similarly, with respect to the current filing season, which just without extension concluded on April 18, we did a lot of messaging, lessons learned from filing season 21 to filing season 22, which we're in currently. We did a lot of messaging encouraging people to file electronically, file an accurate return, file for direct deposit. There was one large transmitter of returns for people that I heard, I'm a tax guy, I came in from the tax community, and I heard in a roundabout way that one large transmitter was telling its franchisees to start submitting returns on January 4. I reached out and I said, hold on, do not submit returns on January 4. You need to reconcile the advanced child tax credits and the economic impact payment that these folks receive before a return is filed. We sent out 200 million letters telling people what they got for an EIP. We sent out 57 million letters telling people on their advanced child tax credit. We encourage people to look into their online account and verify those amounts, because accurate electronically filed returns where people requested a direct deposit, those were going seamlessly.
Okay, and about the employees that you're bringing in the on board, how many of those you're going to have to train? Because I know it can take several weeks to train people once you get them there, but you're saying the ones you're bringing on are basically already trained, even though they've been out of the system?
No. Let me give you sort of a summary, and then if you want me to back it up and give you the individual, I think that you might be inquiring. So all these efforts, when are you going to see, and we're going to see an impact? Trained people in these rooms processing this information. It's going to be in the June range, but we've figured that in when I'm telling you we'll be current by the end of this year. We know the process. And some of the people that we're onboarding, it's going to be 2 or 3 days to train. Remember, we're opening envelopes. We have people who open envelopes. We have people who monitor electronic accounts. So it's a broad range of talent that we're looking at. But when I tell you the end of the year, it's on the assumption that these people are on board in the June range and trained. It doesn't help us to put an untrained person in these facilities.
But our information is telling us it could be 8 weeks to 37 weeks to properly get someone trained.
Not at all. I don't know who told you 37 weeks. I'd like to meet with that person.
So when you come in by June, I mean, this is being May, you're going to have all of these employees already trained.
We don't have 37 weeks left in this year, I believe.
So they'll all be trained by June, or is that realistic, or?
That's where we are with the people coming in. If the people continue to come in at the rates that they're coming in, the June range, having our people in the seats, if you will, trained and handling it, is realistic.
So you can have everybody trained in a month.
Keep in mind, when we do these surge teams, these are already trained people that are just being refreshed. That's 3 to 5.
And that's the majority of the ones coming in? There's not newly hired that's never
both.
worked for the IRS before?
There's both. We're doing every lane.
But you feel confident even those who've never worked for the IRS before, you can have them trained by June?
The person who's never worked for the IRS before is not going to onboard and adjust some taxpayer's account because they reported unemployment compensation as taxable, as non-taxable, and it wasn't. That would be a different category. We have a broad category of people that we are bringing in for different levels of work. And if I may, if it's different, you will hear from me.
Okay, it's just an aggressive plan for hiring people and have them all trained and ready to roll.
Both of you in this country deserve an aggressive plan. We have done a lot of innovative things behind the scenes to make things work. We've used our ARP and other money for technology that radically improved our ability to process certain things that in a different world we probably wouldn't have been able to do or had the support to do it. We've also considered things that we did not implement because it didn't look like it was going to get us to where we needed to be or more complex. We cannot add complexity when we're in the situation we're in. So I think we've done as each of you would do if you were in this seat. We entertained and continue to entertain everything that we can to get this right. And we're not done being innovative where it will be helpful. We can't be innovative if it shorts us on what we're trying to do, right?
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I have one final question on the issue of the backlog and taxpayer service, and then I'm going to turn to enforcement issues. Paper returns. I know your life at the IRS would be made much easier if more taxpayers filed electronically, but we also know that we have to keep open the option for people filing paper returns. If you look at the backlog, as you've indicated, it's essentially those paper returns. And I'm sure you're aware that the taxpayer advocate has said that, quote, paper is the IRS's kryptonite and the IRS is buried in it. And the taxpayer advocate has recommended that the IRS implement the 2D barcoding and or the optical character recognition technology to speed up the processing of paper returns. What plans, if any, do you have to implement this new technology that the taxpayer advocate argues would speed up the process?
The technology is not new. We actually specifically requested funding in our congressional budget justification in 2013, and then again in 2014, again in 2015, again in 2016, again in 2017, for funding for 2D barcoding, and we never got the funding. And so in 2018, the agency shifted to an emphasis on electronic filing. We're currently running about 95, 96%, for the current filing season, 95 or 96% of the individual returns that we're receiving are e-filed. There are some returns and some forms that cannot be electronically filed. We need to get those so the taxpayers have the ability to e-file those. That's a technology draw, if you will, and we move our resources to areas that are there. But we are looking at, and you'll see our response to the TAD that was issued. This is not new, and it's not new for the agency.
Right. Let me just ask you, because I agree, and I do appreciate your efforts to move people toward electronic filing for the reasons we've discussed. But do you agree with the taxpayer advocate's recommendations? I understand that you've asked for it in past budget requests, this new technology, and haven't received it. I don't know if it's in your current request. I don't believe it is. And so I guess my question is, what is your your current assessment of the taxpayer advocate's recommendation?
I appreciate the efforts of the taxpayer advocate, and you'll see us move in a direction that's expansive in this regard.
In terms of deploying these technologies?
It may not be these technologies. These may not be the technologies. You know, if we were asking for it in 2013, we are 10 years essentially technology-wise beyond that.
So put aside the specific technologies, but I guess the question is, you'd be looking for technologies that would allow you to convert a paper return much more quickly to be processed rather than having to sort of key punch every item. Is that right?
Absolutely. Okay. And we have a digitalization office that is not only doing it, this is an outward facing, we're doing it on an inward facing too to help our employees, you know, transferring information.
Good. Let me turn to enforcement, and you've spoken eloquently about the tax gap and the need to get at it. Some have argued that, you know, we should not provide you with more authority to close the tax gap. And again, I remind people this is collecting taxes that are due and owing, that we should not give you additional tools to do that because you're going to go after the little guy. You're going to go after small businesses. Is that in your intention? And if you were given these resources, what would you do and what would the impact be?
Well, one, I note it's National Small Business Week. Two, I think the committee should note that I was born and raised into a small business, very respectful, understand that small businesses, in my mind, are the backbone of this country. The folks that might not have another opportunity employment-wise tend to open a small business, so the respect there is huge. The resources that we're looking at when we talk about enforcement are at the high-end level. It's the big and super big corporations. We have cases where we have $10, $15 billion of tax at issue. We get outgunned in those routinely by the professionals they're able to hire and the resources we're able to bring in. You can come down, and the statistic I use frequently is last year we had over 4 million partnership returns filed. I have 6,500 frontline revenue agents all in, and they are all currently, and would remain so, dedicated to the high-end, most complex returns that we receive. And so the concept that we would expand examination resources to small businesses or lower-income people, and the administration has called for nothing under 400,000. 400,000, quite frankly, if you look at where we are, it would be nothing under a number significantly greater than 400,000. Typically, taxpayers up to about $1 million. We have information reporting. We have either W-2s or 1099s. When you get to $1 million plus, you're talking about entrepreneurs that use multiple layered entities and whatnot, and that's where we should be. That's where we are currently.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that commitment. I just wanted to underscore that point. Let me ask you about conservation easements. These are one mechanism that is used for very wealthy people to escape their tax obligations. Can you talk about that particular device?
There are criminal indictments in the conservation easement cases. There are cases in the United States Tax Court, civil cases, where we have amended petitions to assert civil fraud penalties. That should be indicative of what the IRS and Department of Justice believe about the syndicated easements. We support the intent of Congress with respect to the purpose of conservation easements. The syndicated easements are different. They've been categorized as an abusive transaction. If you read any of the tax court opinions that are out there, you'll see why, and notwithstanding, we've put a lot of resources into this space, both from a counsel perspective, appeals, and exam perspective. We've listed this transaction in 2016, giving people notice that we believe this was an abusive transaction. Notwithstanding our efforts, we have not had an impact on essentially slowing the volume of these transactions that we receive currently. We need congressional help. We need a statute to help us curb this activity.
Well, thank you for that distinction between legitimate and important uses of conservation easements and the abuses that you mentioned. I do have some additional questions on enforcement, but my time is up at this round, and I will turn it again to the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You had mentioned the 2D barcodes on tax forms and the efficiencies that are associated with those things. Can you speak about the IRS's progress in implementing that on those tax codes? But wouldn't the associated cost of implementing this technology be largely offset by the savings from no longer having to pay employees to manually enter this data?
No, ma'am. 2D barcoding still requires us to receive a paper return that needs to be opened and processed. It's a paper return concept. Also, with respect to transmitters and other returns, there is not a system that allows the IRS to seamlessly, if you will, take the equivalent of a Xerox copy or a fax, if you know, kind of a concept that drops it into our system seamlessly and all the numbers drop in. We still have a lot of manual provisions that we require, but we did seek funding to get into this arena, and we are going into the direction of being able to automate paper returns. It helps, as you indicate, it would help from a staffing perspective, it would help from a cost perspective, and I think it would help across the board in terms of shortening the tail and when we can get these returns processed and get refunds out.
But it wouldn't offset the cost that much, is what you're saying? Although you get the
There
technology?
is not a perfect system that the IRS can buy today without a significant cost, both in terms of human cost and resources to get us to where we need to be. But we are definitely going in that direction.
Okay, the IRS recently ended the practice of requiring individuals to provide biometric data in order to create an online account, and the IRS changed course by giving taxpayers the option to verify their identity through the biometric verification or during a live virtual interview. What level of confidence do you have that the biometric data that has already been provided or will be provided is protected?
The biometric data that's provided to IDMe and our memorandum of understanding, the agreement with IDMe, I think that Congress, there have been or are being some hearings. I think Congress has copies of those agreements. But information that somebody would provide currently is destroyed within 24 hours. Information that was provided prior to the time that we shifted was to be destroyed within 30 days. The only pieces that are not are where there's indications of identity fraud, and there's considerable amount of identity fraud associated in the taxpayer world. But we shifted to providing that option also with the recognition that we're looking at other options for taxpayers to provide, and there have been a lot of questions as to why the IRS went to IDMe. We were receiving about 1 million a week of people trying to create online accounts. The system we had before had about a 40% authentication rate. So taxpayers who would try to authenticate that, yes, this is Chuck Rettig, let's say, about 60%, 60, were not getting into the system and had to walk into a site or had to call in, which when we are, on our heels from an inventory perspective is not a meaningful thing for the people in this country. They deserve better. With IDMe, the authentication rate is far in excess of 70%, both on the biometrics part, which is facial recognition, but taxpayers have the alternative to get online with a live IDMe person. On the facial recognition, that's offered in 8 different languages. The in-person is offered in more than 30 different languages. And I think you're aware that we have moved significantly from a service perspective into our multilingual efforts have really been there. So the last part is login.gov can handle about less than 30 transactions per second. We need more than about 1,500 transactions per second. We need a level 2 authentication that once this person is in, this is the person. We are looking at other alternatives, but know as the level of authentication may come down, people that don't want facial recognition or the in-person, what we were hoping to get to, and I think the people in the country would hope us to get to, is once I know this is you, that is your account, I can open up a whole list of services that you can do automatically online. When that authentication level might be different, we have to pull back because of the levels of fraud that we encounter. And some people think fraud is somebody sitting in their backyard, but we're up against nation states. And I think you're aware, we get about 1.8 billion cyber attacks per year. And so to protect the data that people trust us with, we have to be at a higher authentication level or not have so many options available. And we'll explain to you as we get there. And, these are some of the many difficult choices that have to be made because I think collectively we all want the person who is capable of going online to be able to do 100% of their interactions with the IRS online seamlessly. If we open it up for one, we end up opening it up for all. So those are some of the decisions that have to be.
Okay, let's talk about the dollar figure. Do you know how much money's been spent to date on the IRS contract with the ID.me, and what's the status of that contract?
I could get you the information on that.
You don't have a,
I think the contract provided for up to something like $88 million, if I'm not mistaken. But I can get you the information within a day.
and you had mentioned the login.gov. The FY23 request seeks $27 million for user authentication. And how does the IRS plan to spend this increase? Will this funding be used to support that, the login.gov?
Well,
on the 2023 request?
We are where we are with ID.me on, there is still a facial recognition with an option for the interview. We actually are working with login.gov to try to get their transaction per second rate up and to try to get their authentication level up from 40% to a NIST standard 2, IAL2, I think is the actual terminology. It's a higher authentication. And I believe we have the best IT people on the planet, and I've asked our people to coordinate with login.gov. It's not an IRS agency, it's another agency, but it would benefit all agencies. And we should bring the best talent there. And if they get to the point, I think that we've already indicated that we would shift. You would want us to shift, and I'm not saying you personally, but people in the country want us to have the best system, seamlessly helping the people who want to go in that lane and provide as many services as we can, and that's our desire as well.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, I mean, I understand the authentication challenges you've got, given the fraud situation. I do appreciate your moving to a volunteer system when it comes to facial recognition, but the more people can sort of volunteer into your authentication systems, the better off the overall process, I think, will be. I want to go back to a couple of enforcement issues because we saw from a recent Treasury Department report that one of the mechanisms that some employers, and I just want to stress some, use to avoid paying their payroll taxes that are due and owing is employee misclassification. They found that workers being misclassified as independent contractors contributed to a significant tax gap and avoidance of paying the Social Security, Medicare, and other payroll taxes. What role, if any, do you believe the IRS has in addressing employee misclassification?
Well, certainly, people are categorized as an employee, receive wages through a W-2. That's information reporting to the IRS. There's withholding. The accuracy in filing for those folks is typically around 99%. When you get into a lack of withholding and maybe a lack of 1099 type of thing, which gets you into the independent contractor status, it drops down below 50%, sometimes significantly below 50%. There is a significant issue here because these are issues I was aware of on the outside. An employer would like to categorize a worker as a non-employee so they don't have to pay the employer's portion of the employment tax regime that we have. So it's less expensive for the employer to do that. They might not be providing certain insurance, et cetera, et cetera. But the person might actually be an independent contractor, and so that's a determination that the IRS needs to make. It's a facts and circumstances test. There is a form that people can file, the SS-8, and on that form they indicate why they believe somebody is or is not, or a category of employees are or are not an employee. And that information, we don't get a lot of those forms each year. My reaction is that employers don't want to hear that somebody is categorized as an employee. They would probably rather take the risk. But to give you some numbers, in fiscal 21, we received 2,387 SS-8s, which is the request for a determination of employee status. We closed 1,953 of those with an average cycle time of about 240 days, which is exactly the cycle time we had in fiscal year 2018, meaning that those are not backlogged. But quite frankly, in a country the size that we have and the number of workers that we have, 2,387 for a fiscal year.
Right. So, I mean, right now, and as I understand it, and the only mechanism, at least via the IRS, is this voluntary mechanism of filing an SS-8 form. I mean, you don't take other steps to try to resolve.
Well, we do.
Or do you?
I probably a day doesn't go by. I get all the statistics around the country. Probably a day doesn't go by that I read about somebody either being sentenced or convicted for employment tax-related fraud. We are and all of those start in-house with our IRS Criminal Investigation Division. We're very aggressive in that arena. Essentially, in that case, if I withhold from an employee, withhold the payroll that the taxes I'm supposed to pay over to the government, but I don't, and I go and buy a motorhome or whatever, and that employee files a tax return, the government gives that employee credit for the amounts that I stole. So we are hugely aggressive in those arenas, and once a person gets indicted, sentenced, et cetera, those cases become public, and they hit the newspapers in the local communities. And typically, these are the cases where you do see somebody withheld X dollars, and they have the trips, the motorhomes, the houses.
Right. But these are the wage theft cases
Yep.
you're referring to. I'm referring also, though, to these employee misclassification.
There are
I know they're related. Let me move on quickly because I do want to ask you about the provisions in current law that says that if you want to be a government contractor, you have to be up to date on your tax payments. And I know that we've been working with you, and I know the IRS has initiative to be able to quickly determine whether somebody who's one of your contractors at the IRS meets the test, that they've made their tax payments on time. But we want to extend that provision government-wide and facilitate other agencies being able to quickly determine whether or not a proposed government contractor that they would do business with has met these requirements. Where do we stand on that?
Yeah, Congress, there's a provision, and Congress gave us the task to do it, and there is not a waiver under 6103, which makes every taxpayer's information private and confidential. We created what we believed was a workaround that does not violate 6103, where a company could essentially come in and get certification from us, and we would issue a certification certificate that they would then take to the agency where they want to contract with, and it would say this person is current with their tax obligations. There are we're still talking to certain other agencies, but there are other agencies that believe that's too much of a burden on the taxpayer who's doing a government contract to actually have to go into the system. They can do this automatically and get this certification. And we cannot violate 6103, so we're working with the other agency. Some congressional assistance in this space, I think, would help get through the logjam. This needs to happen. I mean, I think we all would agree that somebody contracted with the United States government should not be tax delinquent.
Yes, and we appreciate the.
We actually do it ourselves for our own contract.
Right. No, I know you do,
and it's effective. So
we just want to make sure that the benefit of your expertise is shared with the rest of the federal government. Madam Ranking Member.
Thank you so much. And going back to the issues that my office gets calls on, the high backlog, all of it. And, the call answer rate that's at 20% now, and the customer's having to wait an average of 28 minutes to speak to someone. Your budget request includes a $3.4 billion ask for its taxpayers' services appropriation. How will this money be used differently than in the past to address these customer service failures? And one of the things is, where's my refund tool that we hear about? So what's going to be different to address them in spending this money?
Yeah, one, I wouldn't say it's a failure. We did not get in the situation that we're in because of any issue for IRS employees' desire or dedication. We got here with changed legislation when we'd already done our technology during tax season, confusion for taxpayers on the exclusion of the 10,200, et cetera, and the inability of taxpayers to reconcile, which we've done better this year. I mentioned we sent out these letters, but we have done the best that we could with what we had. but the taxpayer service arena. And note that what happens, we have buckets, and part of this provision asks to the ability to change the buckets. And I am where you are on what's referred to as IAT, inter-account transfer, not taking money from enforcement every year and supporting taxpayer service or operations support. If Congress tells us it should be in that lane, that bucket, we have 4 distinct buckets: taxpayer service, operations support, modernization, and enforcement. And Congress tells us it should be there. We have an IAT allows us to transfer, I think it's up to 5% between those, but we need to be respectful to that. In the taxpayer service lane, what's going to be different? Where are we going to go? One, if we get our levels current, the taxpayer service funds combined with the modernization funds, this year we added a customer callback to 70% of our toll-free lines, which is the lines people call when they have an issue, and they get a call back within the same business day. That, I heard it initially, I thought, well, okay, so we plug something into the system. We had to redo our telephone infrastructure to be able to bring that into the system that we have. So there's a lot more complexities to what we have than necessarily just plugging something in, but also adding people. We received phone calls at the rate of 1,500 per second at various points in time during the year. We received 400% more phone calls this year than any other year. If the country gets back to normal, and we're not organizing ourselves for normal. We're organizing ourselves that we need to be providing the services that we should be providing in the environment that we're currently in, with a being respectful for if we got 10,000 more employees, but these sort of COVID-related issues subsided, I need to find a place to put those 10,000 employees inside the IRS to be respectful for the funds that we use to hire the people. So we're looking at all of that. And that's really what we're talking about. Bottom line, what you want us to do is to answer the phones, open the mail, have our taxpayer assistance centers open. We have 358 taxpayer assistance centers, which are our frontline retail operations. Some of them are in malls, some are associated with other agencies. You want the ability of any American to walk in and ask a question of somebody at the IRS and have that person be trained and capable of answering that question there, whether they go into the system or otherwise. So we need to fully staff our taxpayer assistance centers. We need to train the people who are in those. We are a long ways from that. Attrition is significant with us. That's another avenue, if you will. And there's a whole list of. We need to do better in every lane, and I'm sure every commissioner has asked for what I've asked for, which is, but I combine it with oversight. We're not here to spend money and not have people see how we're spending it or moves that we're thinking of making. But the funding concepts for an agency that touches literally every American, there's significant issues to be able to operate the agency to the extent that I think you all want, but also that every American deserves. We touch more Americans than anybody on the planet. And during the pandemic, let it be known, right? Congress called on us, not the VA, not Social Security, not some other agency, to distribute. We distributed over $1.5 trillion during the pandemic in 3 rounds of economic impact payments, 2 rounds of Form 1040 refunds, and another $93 billion in advanced child tax credit payments, which were distributed over a 6-month period. We had to create the vehicles to do that during a pandemic and handle the filing season. We're in our 3rd COVID filing season. That's where I come to. The end of the runway is not my choice to leave, but it's a statutory term, November 12th. But the end of the runway is there, and you'll hear from me throughout this year and next year. The employees of the IRS, they're dedicated. They want to do it, and we have all levels. I met a lady my first year, and I'll close with this, but I met a lady my first year in Covington, 61 years with the Internal Revenue Service. She showed up every single day at 6:30 a.m. to open envelopes. And when I went up and said, "Hi, I'm Chuck," she was crying. She was so proud to be there. That's the employees that we have. Our employees, we were the front line for the United States government on touching taxpayers who lost a spouse, who lost a family member, who had somebody in the hospital. So one of the issues on phones, people are saying, well, gee, the average time or the difficulty to pick up. I encouraged our employees, stay on that call. Somebody called in on an EIP or a tax issue or whatnot, stay on that call, because every one of those calls flipped to, I lost my husband. I don't want our employees, being the representative of the United States government, saying, you know, I've got 10 more calls I've got to go answer. I want our employees to be human and say, you know, you lost your husband, you know, that must be hard. Wind that call down. But I have talked to, we do this thing, Talk Story, where on Zoom, I meet with 100, 150 employees it's scheduled for an hour. The shortest one we've done is about 2.5 hours, and we do them weekly all around the country, talk to employees in Guam. And I see our employees get emotional when they tell me the stories they're getting from taxpayers. But know that it's IRS employees that were touching people in their homes suffering from COVID during the pandemic, and it's IRS employees that made these distributions, and Congress asked us to do so as rapidly as possible 3 times. I think, I've told our employees, don't correct me if I'm wrong, but I've told our employees, Congress respects you. You know, you only ask people once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, when you know they can meet that challenge. And I'm going to tell you today, and I'll tell you after my term, our employees will meet that challenge. We have people on mandatory overtime. I have 6,000 employees in mandatory overtime for far beyond what we should be asking these people to do, and I have 10,000 employees authorized overtime. The reason I say far beyond, at some point, this creates morale issues. I'm about ready to sort of do the tour, if you will, to these campuses and go and sit with our employees. Thank you, you know, kind of a thing. So I apologize for the long-winded response, but, you know, we are proud of who we are, and we're going into communities. You're well aware of our initiative. We're coming down into Mississippi. We went to Puerto Rico. No other agency is going into the communities we're going to. We're going to these communities. It's the right thing to do. We're not brick and mortar. We're not an institution. We're people helping people. But we're going to communities that have 3 and 4 generations unemployed to bring in and train job skills. We're bringing federal jobs.
I'm over my time limit.
So am I, and I apologize.
Mr. Commissioner, first of all, I appreciate your initiative in going into underserved communities. I know you have $10 million in the budget specifically for that purpose, and look forward to working with you as you implement that. I have one last question for you here. I'll submit the others for the record, and then I'll ask the ranking member if she has any final questions, and then we'll wrap it up. So my final question relates to cryptocurrency. As you know, in the bipartisan infrastructure bill that we passed last year, we had a provision to raise some funds by extending financial reporting requirements on brokers to include cryptocurrency transactions. I've heard estimates that the annual tax gap due to non-reporting of cryptocurrency gains is estimated at approximately $77 billion a year. My question to you, Mr. Commissioner, is what steps have you taken to implement the provision from last year's bill, and how would you assess that figure I just gave you with respect to the tax gap in crypto transactions?
Let me start by saying that the market cap for virtual currencies in the world fluctuates between $1.5 and $2.5 trillion, depending upon if it's Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. That last year there were $14 trillion in transactions in virtual currencies. That the United States, if you do a GNP of the United States to world GNP, we're somewhere between 30 and 40% of possibly $14 trillion in transactions. That based on affidavits in John Doe summons cases, and we've done about 5 or 6 where we've gone for the information, we receive information about taxpayers in certain exchanges that have indicia of U.S. contacts, that we know there's a very significant compliance issue there. So we need information reporting in the virtual currency space. We need, on the back end, I think you're aware, we got FATCA as legislation. We never got the funding to implement and modernize the systems to take care of the information that we get. It does not make sense to me to give us information reporting if we don't get the funding to put the system together to do that. You want it and we want it, and we should not end up in the same place with virtual currencies. I think we have to have virtual currency reporting. We have to have the ability to use that information in a meaningful manner. And I'm not saying to be able to go after people. If we have the ability to match information, we will not go after people as much as we would go after people. So the people who reported don't need to hear from us. We should be able to check that on our end before we send out a notice. So it works both ways. Technology helps us know where not to go as well as to know where to go.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, this is not to prevent innovation in this space. This is, you say, is simply to be able to, collect gains that have been made that should be taxed like other gains in the economy. Senator Hyde-Smith, any final questions?
Yes, I do have a few more, and because I have a few more, if you could be brief with your
Yeah, I'll
answers,
try.
that
I
would be very
apologize
much
for
appreciated. The fiscal year 2023 requests $10.2 million to establish the Mississippi Delta Hiring Initiative. And can you discuss your vision for this initiative, including the benefits it will bring to the Mississippi Delta region?
I expect the IRS to be the agency that revamps the Mississippi Delta region. I think you're aware we're already open to hiring. We had we did an announcement for 15 positions in a presently existing facility in Clarksdale. We had a tremendous response, which shows that we're headed in the right direction. We have people on the ground. I had more than a handful of people who spent the week there meeting with local officials, looking at sites and whatnot. GSA would handle the sites. But my actual vision is I'll tell you how this came, is I'll try to be brief and just put your hand up to stop me. I would love to come to talk to you one-on-one with what we envisioned for Mississippi. But we tried to hire 2,000 people in Austin, Texas. We had 100 qualified people. We went into Puerto Rico and did a hiring, and we would look for 500. We got 600. Mississippi Delta, and your question might be, well, why did this kid from L.A. running IRS in Washington, D.C. get to the Mississippi Delta? The equation's pretty simple. We looked at the EITC hot map. Where are the most EITC claims that we're dealing with? It's in the Delta. We're going to the Delta to bring federal jobs into the Delta. What we're doing is pairing up with 4-year and 2-year universities, colleges, to bring job skills. It's unfair of us to say that every 26-year-old you don't need a 4-year degree to work for the IRS. You need some job skills, which we'll do through these 2- and 4-year schools. And then somebody said to me, well, what about, you don't know what they think about the IRS. Well, we have over 100 high schools in this country that have VITA programs. So we're bringing VITA programs to high schools in these communities so that people understand the benefits of giving back to the community. People understand what IRS does, and then sort of build the pipeline. It's probably, and there's no magic to this is just Chuck Rettig, that there maybe it's a 6-year project, but my goal is that in the communities that we go into, rather than seeing subsidized housing where somebody's painting an older building, that we see the developers come in with new housing because you've got people with federal jobs. And it's looking like we're going to make this a reality, and we are on the ground there.
We appreciate that. And can you tell me the percentage of your workforce that's still working from home?
Some of our workforce always works from home. We have people who've been telework eligible forever, but 99% of our workforce is working.
99%
is working, but we have
But
people.
you don't know the percentage that's working from home? I mean, what is the normal percentage 3 years ago that was working from home?
I would say that we're probably not that far away from where we are today. We have thousands and thousands of employees who are telework eligible.
I mean, the information I'm getting is 50% work from home. Is that accurate information?
I would say that that's low for where we are.
It's higher than that?
You know, our frontline revenue agents don't need to go into an office. Our frontline revenue officers, our IT people will stay at home. Those are telework eligible people. We have a bargaining agreement with the National Treasury Employees Union as to who is telework eligible, and we abide by that agreement. So we have all different categories.
Okay, but it's more than 50% is what you're saying, that's a low number that works from home for the IRS.
I would not hesitate to ask you something, but also where somebody is working, the physical location anymore is mostly irrelevant, quite frankly, other than our people who are processing paper.
That doesn't hinder the process that you're trying to accomplish now?
Zero. Those folks were back in June of 2020, socially distanced, working split shifts. So the people who process the paperwork, split shifts, they've been in their facilities since June of 2020. The people on the phones are telework eligible. We went into the pandemic with only 3,000 of 15,000 people telework eligible. Within 2 months, 15,000 of 15,000 people were telework eligible. Where that helped us was when we had, hurricanes, earthquakes, snow, where we would shut down an IRS facility, our employees continued to work from home on the phones.
So that's inaccurate. More than 50% are still
I
working.
don't have that number. We'll get you that
Okay.
number if you want it either as a question for the record, or we'll just get it back to you.
Yeah, when you said that was a low number, that there's, that concerned me.
I just know where the people are, and they're all working.
And
Your
the
question would be, how
29
many of our people are working? More than 99%.
2019 report from the Office of Personnel Management found that IRS employees spent hundreds of thousands of hours doing taxpayer-funded work for their labor union. Are you aware of the hours IRS employees spend on union time now? That was in 2019.
I'm not, but we just concluded our union contract. We can get you that, but we're locked into that by a contract.
And the IRS employees that dedicate time to union activities on the job, is that fair instead of addressing the backlog of returns of unanswered calls? Do you consider that that's the best way their time is
I would
spent?
like to have every employee who's capable of answering phones or opening or processing mail doing that. I don't know the category of the folks in that. And again, all I can say is we have a union contract that I'm required to abide by.
Okay, and the religious freedom is one of the greatest cornerstones of our country, and I'm really troubled to learn of federal agencies, including Treasury and the IRS, tracking federal employees who request religious exemptions. Can you confirm that the IRS is tracking this information on religious exemptions? Are you tracking that info?
This is the first I've heard that we would be tracking. The only reason that we had issues with exemptions was under the mask mandate, or when we had a mandate that people had to be vaccinated or terminated. We had medical and religious, but I have no information. You can ask me a question for the record, but
Okay.
you're the first I've heard of it, and I would oppose us tracking any religious information.
Okay, well, my time is out again.
Well, thank you, Senator Hyde-Smith. Mr. Commissioner, thank you for being here today. I want to also take this opportunity to thank you for your service. I don't know if you'll appear before this subcommittee again, but I am grateful for your testimony and for the ongoing partnership with you and your staff, and believe that you are committed to doing the very best job you can on behalf of the American people in tough times. Our members will have 1 week to submit questions for the record. Those are due May 10th, and I'd appreciate it if you could and your team could get back to us as quickly as possible in response to any of those questions. With that, the subcommittee meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.